No. Cool. So this next spot, I just wanted to spend a little bit actually like taking, hearing the effects of everything we've just been talking about. Will be from an X32, but yeah, hopefully Logic decides to play friendly. But so we have basically what I've got here is some tracks from a show we did about 2 years ago, and it's pretty much your standard church setup. It's drums, full drum kit, bass guitar, acoustic guitar, electric guitar, keys, and one male, one female vocal. So pretty simplistic setup, and figure we can just go through one channel at a time and kind of talk through what I'm doing. We'll hear everything just as is first, and then we'll go and we can A/B it mixed and raw. So we've got a song, which, yeah, I think copyright and all that's fine. This is not my song. This is not me singing. This is North Point. Let's give Logic a second to warm up here. And yes, all right, cool. So basically these are coming in just like they were playing live. So I'm going to go ahead and just bring everything up. Basically we've got a kick-in mic, a kick-out mic, snare top and bottom, two toms, overheads. So we'll start with just those. And I'm just going to go ahead and just bring everything up as is. No EQ or compression or anything. Okay. So this is just the drums. Okay. And bring in bass. And I'm just going to kind of set everything at the same level, so we can just kind of hear everything before we start mixing it. Okay. We've got Nord is basically a piano, and we've got a synth channel. And then in here, we've got some tracks on this second layer, which hopefully for y'all on the live stream. Are you guys still able to hear my mic okay? Cool. So you got tracks, and then lead vocals out for right now. But so this is kind of, you can hear everything, but obviously it needs some work. Stuff is stepping on top of each other, all that. So I'm going to set this to loop really quick. So just loop this song. And we're going to go through one input at a time and mix it. Cool. Let me pull this back out. Cool. Yeah, definitely. Okay, sweet. Cool, so let's go through. We'll start with kick-in mic. Typically when you've got two mics on a kick, usually the in mic is closer to the beater, so you kind of use that for your attack. And then the one on the outside usually has a little bit more low end to it because it's had time for the wave to develop and get out of the drum. So really quick, we'll just listen. This is just the in mic with no EQ or compression or anything on it. Okay, and I'm gonna flip to the mic that's outside the drum, which is a Beta 52. So here it's a little bit lower. It's not as much attack. There's the one inside. Okay, so you kind of hear the difference. So you kind of want to highlight what's already naturally there. So I put them up together, and you kind of get a nice, but we can clean it up. So what I'm going to do, and you should be able to see this here on the screen. So for the attack, I'm going to start with my high-pass filter, which is not going to go that high. If you look right up, this one is variable, so it lets me pick a frequency to set it at. On an analog console, normally it would just be, straight at 100 hertz, which is usually about where I start. So we'll do that, and because it's a kick-in mic and I'm just using this for attack, I'm not really looking to get the low end out of it, so I'm going to go ahead and bring this up probably almost to about 200 hertz, because I want the low end from the other mic, not from this mic. So I'm going to take this, and I'm getting a lot of cymbal and stuff in there, but we'll get, and of course he stops right there. I'm going to turn the EQ on. So let's hear, here we go. So that's a little better. And kind of one of the good ways to kind of hear what, you want to listen and find out, okay, what is it that's standing out that I kind of don't like, and get rid of that. Real quick note when it comes to EQ, always better to cut than boost. If you think, best analogy I've heard is like a statue. You don't start with a lump of wood and start gluing on other lumps of wood until you have what you want. You carve away what you don't need, and what you're left with is the final product. It's good. And again, when you're boosting EQ, you're essentially adding things that aren't naturally there. Whereas when you're cutting, it's a little more natural sounding. See, if you were to go in a room, if I were to put something brand new in this room, it would stick out a lot quicker than if I took one thing out. And you're, okay, wait, hold on, figure out what's missing. It's a lot more natural. So you want to look, and of course there's exceptions to every rule. Drums are probably the biggest exception. Drums, you just make them sound good. But it's a good starting point. So I listen to this, and for me, I hear there's still a little bit of like a woody kind of tone, like something that's a little boxy that I don't quite like. So best thing to do, you can boost a little bit, and then kind of use your center frequency control to sweep through until you hear what it is. See, that's kind of got a weird, that 500 hertz right there, it's kind of like a cardboardy right there. Here's without it. Okay, so that's the boost. So I might come, now that I know where it's at, take it out a little bit, and listen to how much the attack cleaned up a little bit. So here's with it, without it. So it just kind of cleans it up just a little bit, okay? And then my cue control, I can control how wide that cut is or how narrow, okay? So that right there gives me a really nice clean attack. I like that, okay? And right here, I'm really not adding anything. All I did was cut out that 500 hertz, and we've got that. Okay, so let's start there. So now I'm gonna move on to my second mic, okay, which is the low one. Now I wanna kind of do the opposite with this one. So I'm gonna go ahead and flip over here. This already has a lot of low end content, so I'm kind of gonna do the opposite of what I did with the other one. I might still cut out a little bit of the low end, like the super, super low end that I don't necessarily need. But on this one, I'm gonna go ahead, I'm gonna take my high shelving EQ and pull out a bit of that, so it's kind of darker. Now I'm hearing on the low end, there's something that's kind of tubby sounding, in my opinion. So again, I'm gonna pick a band and I'm gonna boost. I mean, actually that's pretty close. That's sitting right about 115 hertz. So I'll find it, yeah, right there, like 100 hertz. It's sounding kind of ugly. So if I pull a little bit of that out, cleans it up. But now I'm kind of missing a lot of low end too. So I might narrow that cue. And again, we've reached the end of the loop. So I might go really narrow because it's really not a lot of frequencies around that I don't like. It's just kind of that one. So that's a little better. I'm going to back off, put a little bit more low end in there. Let's see. And then there's something over here in the mid-range too. I feel like right around here, it's kind of, I don't know if it's head noise, but it's a little like plunky right there. So I might pull that out just a little bit. And now I'm sitting pretty good. Now I just want some thump. So I might actually take a band down here. And usually for a kick drum, the kind of punch is right in between 60 and 80 hertz. So if I take this, make it kind of narrow, and I'm gonna go and boost that a little bit, and you start to feel that like. So you don't want to go overboard with it, but a nice round, kind of wide band. Okay, cool. So now there's that, and now let's bring them both up together. Now I got a nice punchy kick drum. Get some nice low end to it. So you hear that? Cool. Now again, this is yeah. So here's switching back and forth. Here's just the in. There's just the out. Oops. There's together. Okay. Yeah, and then I will take out the EQ on both of them. So now here's back on. Hear the difference? So it kind of just cleans up. It didn't sound bad before, but now it sounds great. Cool. And that's just EQ. Haven't touched compression or anything. So that's my kick drum. Now this is actually a really good point to illustrate gates as well. You hear right now, literally all I have turned up is the kick drum mic, but I'm hearing the entire drum set. So this is where setting a gate, which I'll go ahead and click over the gate here so you guys on the stream can see. So basically what I'm going to do, we'll start with just the kick in mic. I'm going to turn this gate on, and I'm going to set the vertical line there as my threshold. So basically what I want to do, I want to find what you guys hear in the room. If you look here, this blue little dot kind of shows me where the signal level's at. For you guys on the stream, you can see the meter there. So I kind of want to move my threshold to where all the other noise is kind of getting cut out, to where now all I've got is that. See, I'm getting a little bit of cymbal in there, so maybe I want to tighten up the release a little bit on this. Let's see. So actually, I'm still hearing something else somewhere. Oh, that's why. Hold on. I'm messing with the wrong channel. There we go. That sounds more like it. Okay. So now literally all I'm getting, so there's with the gate on, here's without it. And I will tell you, if you don't have a super consistent drummer, gates can be really difficult to work with because obviously if they're pounding it one song and the next song they're barely hitting, your gate threshold is going to be changing. It's almost not worth the hassle. But if you've got a nice, consistent drummer, gates can really, really clean up your sound. So that's pretty tight on that. So let's do the same thing on the other one, which of course now. All right, so now on the low one, start with none. And usually what I do when I'm setting a gate, I'll start like this where it's open, and I'll just start bringing up the threshold until I hear it working. See, in this one I'm still getting some cymbal in there, so I might want to quicken up the release, make it close a little faster. But the other thing you want to be careful of is that you don't cut off the attack, that you don't get rid of that initial hit.
So for this drum, since you do have the attack coming from your inside kick mic, would you roll that gate higher or the threshold higher, or just kind of still you want that?
You still kind of, yeah, you still want the punch of it. Like technically it'll be, you know, because of physics and stuff, it'll be slightly afterwards once that low end develops. But you don't want to be cutting off any part of the sound. You want to let the kick drum in its entirety come through. So I kind of find, you hear that gate sound where it's kind of flickering, it's trying to decide if it should be open. You go right above that, and usually you're pretty good. So now we've got, there we go. And I might even, honestly, for me, I like a lot of low end, so I think I'm going to go ahead and boost a little bit more low end in this kick drum. And we'll see how it fits it. But now bring them both back in, and now it's super tight, really punchy, as opposed to you've got toms and all kind of other stuff in there now. Gain it up, and now it's just that. Cool? Sweet. So there's kick drum. And there, I'll start bringing in a little bit of snare. But really quick, let's A-B the top and bottom. So this is the snare top mic, completely unprocessed. Okay, and here's the snare bottom. Okay, so that's a lot of the snares, that's kind of the sizzle, the crackle. So the two together, this is both of them together. Okay, now it's granted bottom snare mic you usually layer in pretty conservatively. But yeah, so with this, you know, I typically when I mix, I start with the mic and get a good sound out of that first. And again, my high pass filter. Let me jump back over to my EQ. Let's get to the snare top channel, and I'm going to start with a high pass filter at 100 hertz. And you might not necessarily be able to hear a lot of. I'll try to A/B it here. Is with it on. Is without it. It's very subtle, but after 32 channels of having all that below 100 hertz in it, it gets muddy fast. Which now that he's hitting it, let's try to listen here. Very, very subtle, but even just the fact, anything else, there could be rumblings from within the room, the kick drum, the subwoofers that are getting picked up that you just don't need. So better just not even have to think about it. So I'll set it right about there. And again, I'll listen to the snare drum and just see what I don't like and get rid of what I don't like. So I will say as kind of a trick, 500 hertz, getting rid of that on the snare usually cleans up a whole lot. And usually a lot of the pop, the stick noise, sits right around 3K. So if I go even just a slight like 3 dB boost there, you hear that? Hear that? So it just kind of makes it pop. Yeah, exactly. And again, every snare is different. Snares, the joke is, every engineer is judged by their snare sound. So it's, it takes some work, and every snare is going to be different. But another kind of key, usually right around either 100 or 200 hertz, is going to be kind of the body of your snare, the really deep kind of punch. Like a lot of the newer Bethel stuff has a deep snare sound, and half of that is from the tuning and the actual drum itself. But the other half is the way it's mixed and kind of accentuating that. So if you listen, this right around here, there's kind of that deep kind of punch to it, giving it, throw some high end sizzle, and now you've got this kind of punchy snare sound out of it, which some snares might sound good, some might not. So we'll get back to where we were. We'll stick right around there for now. And the cool thing, instead of boosting the high end on this, I can now layer this bottom snare mic in there a little bit. So there's without, or there's with the bottom snare. There's without it. It just adds that nice little crunch. And all, honestly, I'm really going to do to this bottom snare mic is I'm going to high pass it up, all the way up at about 400, which, so on its own, it's going to sound like this. And again, because that's really all I'm looking to get out of it. I don't need anything else from it because I've got it all in this top snare, right? Okay. Now I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to go ahead and gate the snare because we got the luxury of this being assistant drummer. I can gate it and it'll be pretty effective. So I'm going to come to the top and same thing. I'm going to, let's see, I don't think, here you go for y'all on the stream. There you go. So I'm going to bring the threshold up until I'm catching nothing but the snare. Okay, so that's a little too tight. I'm kind of losing, you've got the attack, the ADSR, the envelope. I'm getting the attack, but everything else is getting cut off. So I'm going to lower the threshold. and wait for this to loop back. There we go, okay. So I want to make sure I'm getting the beginning. Okay, that's good. See, now this is an example where the hold and the release time on it, I want to increase the hold time to match the envelope of the snare. So I'm going to make it last a little longer when it's open. So you kind of hear that. That's a bit long, so I could shorten up the release time. But now I'm getting, the entire tone of the snare. In fact, I could probably loosen that threshold a little bit more. Clean, as opposed to, okay. Cool, so I'm going to do the same thing on the bottom snare. Let me hop over here. And the same thing, I'm just going to turn my gate on and bring the threshold up until it's all I'm getting. See, that's perfect. I'm going to bring this top one back in. Bring our kick drum back in. So I'm still getting a little bit of cymbal through the snare, but that's okay. Once I bring in the actual cymbals, it's negligible anyways. Yeah. See, right there, we've got a pretty solid drum sound as is. Yeah. Now the snare drum, you could probably, in my opinion, add a little bit more meat to it. So that I would come back down to that kind of 200 hertz area and give a little bit of a boost there. Again, you want to be kind of, gracious with boosting just because you start to add stuff that's not there. But even that right there. Cool, now here's a good, let me kind of loop this tom section and see if we can get some good tom sounds going here. Yeah. Cool, so we'll keep this going. So I'm going to kill everything else real quick, and I'm going to start with tom 1. Okay, cool. Might be able to get some good visuals of like EQ and stuff on here. Okay, cool. Sweet, so again, my tom high pass filter up to, especially on a high tom, about 100 hertz. Okay, now I'm gonna listen. This tom sounds pretty good on its own. So there's a little bit of that cardboardiness that I think is sitting right here around 400. Just a little bit of that. It's a little flat, so if I just pull that out a little bit, now all of a sudden it's punchy. Literally, that's 5 dB of cut right there. We'll wait for it to come back here. All right, so here's without it. It's just with that one cut. And the stick noise is a little much, which is sitting around 4K, I think. Yeah, the kind of weird stick noise, not natural stick noise. So I might pull just a little bit of that out. Not much though, because you still want the attack. I might throw a little bit on the super high end there. Just like that. And then if I wanted to get really punchy with it, I could find where that resonance of the tom is at down here. Let's wait for him to hit it, and you can hear where that's at. See, sitting right there around 120 for this tom. And that's interesting, you hear there, it's got a little bit of a natural resonance there where it's, even he's hitting, yeah. So if I come lower, now I get a super punchy rack tom, Cool, so there's that, now I'll move over to the floor tom. Yeah, well that one actually, let's see. I think I was messing with this one earlier. Let me walk through so here's on its own. Okay, and I think on this one, let's go ahead, I had this, let me roll this back in. So again, this 500 hertz area, which honestly a really good starting place on toms is just to kind of scoop out 500 hertz and start there. And because this is low tom, you notice I'm really not taking much off the bottom end because I kind of want it. And then on this one, I just want a little more attack and a little less rumble. So just get rid of that. And it sounds, okay, so now let's bring everything back in. Okay. And then toms are normally kind of fun to pan out. So, stick high tom to the left a little bit, low tom to the right a little bit, so it kind of spreads out. So, throw in some overheads. And again, really quick on overheads, let me mute these. I'm gonna go ahead and come up on my, let's see, I wanna make sure if we cut to this, y'all can see it. So I'm gonna go ahead and just bring my, my high pass up pretty high. Honestly, I'd go all the way up on, I mean, it depends on how you're using them. If you're getting a full kit sound from them, you kind of don't want to go this high. You might want to go, you know, maybe one, we'll kind of do this, maybe, yeah, around 100 hertz or so. And then maybe just scoop out where the harsh of the cymbals is. So in fact, let's see. So I would say, you know, usually right around where the vocals hit, right there. And then maybe just add a little bit of sizzle on the top end so they kind of shine a little bit, just like that. Cool. So now you bring everything else back in. Cool. And there you go, you got a good drum mix. Cool. And that's just EQ, that's no compression, that's no, so that's just kind of starting from there. So let's go ahead and mute drums for a second, and let's go ahead and listen to bass guitar. So we've got, just kind of see what we've got here. I'm gonna jump over here. And again, I'm kind of nitpicking. We're gonna go through everything individually, and then we're gonna go and kind of see how it all fits together in broad strokes, not necessarily nitpicking. But usually if you get a good idea for each individual. Now bass guitar can be approached a couple different ways. If you wanna get some super, super low end out of it, you know, you kind of don't wanna use a high pass like this, but typically I high pass up to maybe 70 or 80 hertz, depending on how, honestly, usually faster songs, you don't want as much huge low end because it's too fast, it's gonna get muddy, whereas slower songs, you can get away with opening up the bottom end a little bit. But for something like this, you know, some of the go-to frequency on the bass guitar, 300 hertz is usually kind of where the throat, the kind of growl of it is. So I kind of bring this up a little bit. You get some of that, you know, kind of, sometimes it might sit a little lower, but some of that kind of low mid growl. There's without it, there's with it. You know, it's kind of subtle. And then string noise, you've kind of got growly string noise sitting right around 1K. Let me get this out a little bit. So this, where I'm at, right here. So here's like what your high mid-range sounds like, and then you get in a kind of plucky string ring up here. So, and depending, you know, you want to be careful with that because sometimes it can distract from other, because it can get a little transient, a little plucky, and so it might distract, especially if it's slightly off from things like the hi-hat and the snare and other rhythmic elements. You kind of don't want too much of that, but just enough to be able to define the note. So I mean, with this bass tone, honestly, I listen to this and I want a little bit more low mid, maybe take just a tad off the high end like that. Cool, and then that's sitting pretty good, I think, for a fast song like this, you know, which I can, I guess we'll keep on this part of the loop. Cool. So there's drums and bass. So let's pop them all in real quick and kind of see how the bass guitar sits with the drums. Sometimes I like to just listen to kick and bass and just kind of see how they're sitting together. Make sure they're actually working together, not fighting each other. So I mean, they're, you know, it's pretty good. So something like that, right? Okay. So we've got that. We're gonna acoustic for now because this isn't really an acoustic song. We can hear it real quick. In fact, I'm not entirely sure he's playing on this one. There we go. Yeah, we're gonna skip acoustic on this song. But let me go ahead and set this loop back to the entire song real quick, just so we get the full. All right, cool. So now and we've got a stereo electric here. It's got left and a right side, two different mics. So that's usually helpful to get kind of a really wide tone. You pan them out, which let me hop over to. And they both say left. Don't listen to them. One's left, one's right. So the advantage is here. Let me put them both down the middle right here. So it's essentially mono. And you hear this. Okay. So now when I spread them out, it widens up the field a bit, makes it sound way, way bigger. Okay, and the interesting thing, if you listen, in fact, let me unlink these real quick. You can actually kind of hear, we were talking about phasing earlier, because it's two mics on a single source, you can actually kind of hear a little bit of phase change when I roll one in as opposed to the other. If you listen, you hear the tone change a little bit. That one's kind of thin, get some body there. Okay, and granted they're two different mics, but now check this out. I'm gonna flip the phase on one of them. Flip the polarity. Okay. all I did was take one and completely invert the positive and negative. Here it's kind of hollow, it's kind of, I'm gonna flip it back. Now it's right there. That's the kind of stuff phase can do. So that's why it's important, okay? So now I'm gonna spread these out. And I kind of have a bright one and a dark one. And again, as far as EQ, I would take this, put my high pass up at 100, because I don't need all that low end in my electric guitar. I'll do that on both of them. In fact, I'm gonna link them again. Just like that. Let's see, and then I might scoop out a little bit in this super high, just so it doesn't kind of fight with the vocals when we get there, you know? And I might get rid of some of this. If you listen to some of this low end, it might be some room from the amp room it's in, but that's kind of a little muddy right there. So I'm gonna pull some of that out right there. And I mean, then that's sitting pretty nice. I mean, pull everything else back in. Cool, so it's kind of, it's sitting in a good groove. Cool. So I mean, right there, that's drums, bass, and guitar. The only other thing I think this song has is some track. So, and then really quick, we'll talk. I know not everybody uses tracks, but I mean, for a second, this is the track that's on this song. So it's a lot of synth elements, a lot of pulsing, kind of low end, a lot of textures. So for something like this on a track, I usually look for, okay, what am I actually looking to get out of the track? So I want these kind of textures, these pulsing elements, and honestly, the low end on it sounds really, really good. If I crank this, and that kind of, you know, that gives like a nice groove that contrasts what the band's doing. So that's something I'd want to bring out. So I might look at this, and I want to make sure my kick and bass have room. So I might pull off some of the super, super low end, but not a lot. And then I might darken up the super high end, just so it doesn't fight with vocals, but I think I'm pretty much gonna leave everything else alone, okay? So now, let me set that in, and let me try to bring everything else back in above this. So there's my track. So I'm gonna bring in my drum set. Maybe bring it down just a little bit. I'm noticing it's kind of hard to get my snare up out front of the track, so I might, you know, see where that's sitting, go in the track and try to carve some of that out. So my snare is kind of sitting right in this 2K range, I think. If I boost out, that seems to be what's fighting with my snare, so I might, now my snare's sticking out. So instead of pushing my snare through the roof, you know, so put in a little bit more. But yeah, so there's that, all right, cool. Okay, and I'm still getting that. Now that I'm hearing it in the context, I'm kind of losing my track with this, so I might bring this high end back in a little bit. Okay, bring in my bass guitar, my electric guitar. See, now it's sitting in the mix. It's not replacing the band, but they're working together really nice. And then once you hear it all in context, you kind of listen to, okay, and you might change your mind. Okay, well, this actually is kind of fighting with this or that. But I mean, that's it pretty nice. So that's drums, bass, electric guitar. Cool. Sweet, and then we can try to fit a vocal on top of this. So let's jump back to the beginning. Okay, now we'll say, these are live vocals, which if any of you have ever recorded live vocals, you know they're very unforgiving. So I ask for grace right now. But yeah, so let's hear this vocal real quick. And it's from Camp, so it's pretty hyped tracks. So we'll keep this track. So again, I'm gonna listen just for a second. And we're gonna hear just kind of tonally what's actually happening. So again, I'm gonna take my high pass up to about 100, and he's got kind of a funky mid-range going on, probably right around.
Like a river you rushed
actually, before I do that,
so my heart covered all my sin.
There's some of this proximity effect coming from the mic right here, around 200, you listen, I'll boost it.
Now I see a love
kinda
that's
the sound you get from being right up on the
shining
mic.
my soul. And
So you back just a little bit of
now
that
I know
off.
I'm yours forever.
Okay.
You
I'm gonna
won't
layer everything else. And this is usually vocals is where I definitely start to get into compression, because if you listen his volume level,
singing about you,
it's
I
kinda
can't stop
all over the place. And part of that, he's moving, back and forth. And
Can't stop, I won't
so one of the things I
deny
could
it.
do, let's hop over to
Nothing's ever
compression
gonna
real quick.
keep me quiet. You have
So I'm gonna kick
saved
the
my
compressor on, and
life.
I'm gonna lower my
I
threshold.
can't
I'm gonna
stop
set,
singing.
here, let me bring this down for a second. For vocals, kind of for me, specifically in worship, I like to stick to kind of what's, a pop vocal type compression, which basically keeps the vocal in your face the entire time. It kind of kills a lot of the dynamic range, but especially on fast songs, you don't want to lose the vocal in the mix. So, but yeah, so, I'll start with a ratio about 2.5 to 1. And then I will actually bring my threshold down until I'm seeing usually starting between 4 to 8 dB of gain reductions. If you look at this, it's averaging, pulling off about 6 or so. And when it gets loud, it's hitting 8 or 10. And then I'll come, we talked about output gain, I'll come and actually put back on, at least that 8 dB of output gain. So now, if I bring this up, you hear that compression on its own like this. And yes, this was a youth game. And that kid is having a blast. All right. So let me bring everything back in now.
You say I can't stop, I won't deny it. Nothing's ever gonna keep me quiet.
So, but now it's, I can set the vocal there and I can leave it, and it's staying on top. Now if I take that compressor off, okay, even if I give him a volume up, the volume's kind of, do another play right away, you hear it's a lot less present. Does that make sense? Cool. There's that. Let's jump to another song real quick, one more fast song just to
Matt, quick question.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
If you're playing with, if your band's using tracks or
Uh-huh.
something like that, your track content obviously could change a lot between songs.
Yes.
So like one song it could just be a pad, and one song it could be like this, a lot of synth and
Mm-hmm.
stuff. Are you changing EQ, compression stuff on the fly for that track?
EQ, sometimes, yeah, I'll listen and see. Again, my biggest thing is I want to hear it all, but if it's fighting with like a major element, so like if it's, if it's distracting from the vocals, or if, like in that case in the beginning I was hearing the snare just really wasn't cutting through the track, I'll listen to see if it's actually masking anything that I want to hear. And if so, then I'll adjust for that.
So are you adjusting on the fly, or you
Yeah,
kind of make notes?
yeah. I mean, I might
rehearsal?
definitely make notes during rehearsal. Just, I definitely want to hear the tracks and know, if it's, if you're able to hear the track before the service, it's like, hey, cool, you know what to expect, That way it's not, it's not 100% on the fly. You at least kind of know when it's coming. But a lot of times it is kind of, okay, because it is dependent on how everybody else is feeling. There might be times when, and I mean, just to be honest, sometimes it's rough Sunday mornings, and so there may be weekends where you may rely heavier on a track. It could even be the same song, but maybe, you're short a guitarist, or maybe, it's a new guitarist, doesn't know the part of it, so you might rely heavier on a track in some weeks than you would another. So it is to a degree on the fly, but I definitely try to be as prepared as possible and knowing, so the track isn't like a complete surprise, if that makes sense. Cool, so let's hit, again, just another real quick fast song. And this one I don't believe has any tracks. But yeah, let's go ahead. Let me bring this back down. And again, let's, approach it from scratch. So this, build from the drums up. Drums are still, nice and tight. The only thing I'm noticing with the snare, it's not necessarily popping the way I want it to. It sounds, it's punchy, it's good. But one of the things, I like to throw just a bit of compression on my snare because it really does make it pop just a bit. So let me see. Of course, we're in a part with no snare. So here we go. So here, right now it's not compressing at all. I'm going to lower the threshold a bit. Let's listen to just the top snare for now. Okay. Oh yeah, let me change the screen over so you guys can, where's my mouse at? There we go. Go to the snare, we're gonna look at, compression. So if you look at now each hit, it's taking off about 6 dB or so. So what it does kind of flatten out the sound a bit. If you listen, here's with it. So there's some more tone in this one. So I don't want to kill the tone of it, but I do want to kind of catch it. So what I might do is play with the attack and release times a bit to try to catch the part of the snare that I'm looking for. See there, I'm getting the attack. Let's see. And of course, let's just there it is. Okay. So there's with compression. It's without compression. Kind of hyped it up a little bit. It gave it a little bit of life. So I'm gonna give it that, and I'm gonna layer the bottom snare back in. Okay. Bring my kick back in. So here's no compression. It's still there. It sounds good, but this gives it some more energy. It kind of hypes it up. It makes it really, you know. So I'm gonna bring everything back in. Drums and bass. Electric guitar in on this. See, now that I'm hearing it more though, I think this little kind of 3K boost we put on the snare now is sounding like a bit much now, so I might actually take it out a little bit. And now it's kind of a bit warmer of a snare sound. So it's almost like I got the pop from the compression as opposed to the EQ, and it worked out better. So now, and specifically the electric guitar in this song, I'm kind of hearing it needs to fill up more of the lower mid-range as opposed to the last one, it needed some more of that high. So I might put back in some of this stuff I scooped out down here. Maybe even, oops, the loop, sorry. So yeah, so I might, down here around 300 or so, actually give it a little boost. So it's a little bit darker sounding. Because the synth, if you listen to this one, the synth has a lot of high-end content. So something like that, I don't want it to get masked by the electric guitar. Let's see. Turn that compression back on the vocal.
To all the hopeless, to all the hopeless. Come on, sing it out. This song of hope.
Probably pull out a little bit more of this proximity stuff down here, so his vocal kind of shines a bit more. Add a little bit of hi-hat. I'm gonna pull out some of this right here. Let me get that for a second.
Hands up!
That kind of weird mid-range resonant thing going on. I'm hearing that in there a bit, so I'm going to go ahead and pull.
Somebody scream!
There we go. Use camp for the
You
win.
are the joy
That's a bit much, so I'll put,
to the broken.
there we go. So there's that.
To the
Without
broken.
EQ and compression. So here's our raw vocal.
And you are the peace to all
Now I'm
the
noticing the high end is bringing in a lot of hi-hat, so I might actually pull that back out. And now put it back in the...
This song of hope, your light shines in our soul. We never let it go. We never let it go.
The guitar might be a little dark now, so I might go back and say, brighten it back up a little bit.
Makes our hearts sing, yeah. We never let it go. We never let it go.
So that's kind of how, working through one element at a time, kind of seeing what each instrument is contributing. And as you bring them in, things will change. It's like it might cause something else to stick out. You might make a decision up front by itself, and then you throw a vocal and you're like, oh, okay, yeah, that doesn't work. I need to change that. And so it's all about context and what it's feeling. Does that kind of make sense? Cool. Any major questions at this point? I want to do a slow song real quick. And
I think as the role of a audio engineer, sound front of house guy, I guess you could see your role as either being, I'm going to set the mix, keep it fairly static and let the band control a lot of the dynamics and changes, or you're going to constantly be moving stuff around. So if you know the song, you'll pull this instrument up. How do you kind of see your role?
Yeah, I definitely, and this is definitely, a subject that, warrants a lot of conversation, but I think I do, especially in a church context, for something as dynamic as worship, as opposed to a concert where it's kind of a pre-programmed. I think there definitely is a degree. It's kind of an overused term, but I mean, essentially the console kind of is your instrument, and you are as much a part of the band. You need to come knowing the songs. You need to come knowing that kind of thing, or else you won't necessarily know which parts to highlight or what. Because essentially, at bare minimum, your job is to reinforce what's happening on stage. And there may be times where, on top of reinforcing what's happening on stage, there may be problems that need to be fixed. We don't all have, professional musicians. We don't have the best gear. We don't have, so a lot of times you are kind of playing, you're fixing problems at the same time. Like there's a creative aspect but a lot of times you do have to, account for other things that could be going wrong as well. So it's kind of a hybrid of the two, but it is a very active role. It's definitely not a like set and leave it and you guys, turn yourselves up and down and that kind of thing. But I think it's very much, it needs to be kind of in cahoots with each other. It's got to usually for me, when I'm mixing, a lot of times, really close communication with the worship leader and trying to catch, what they're trying to do with the song. Naturally, that's what I'm going to be getting from the stage. So if I'm fighting that with my own idea of how, then it's like, I might be able to get it there, but one, it's not going to be reinforcing what's on stage. It's going to be fighting it, and I'm going to try to be creating something that's not necessarily there. If that makes sense. Whereas I found that usually the best thing is to take, see what's there, see what's being contributed, and reinforce it in the best way. Find ways to make it, listen for what's happening. Certain parts of a song, there might be an electric guitar that's carrying great amount of energy, and you're like, cool, and then later in the song, you're, that energy isn't there anymore. It's not, so you kind of migrate to something else, which actually this song is kind of a good example. Let me play through it and actually listen through once. And I'm going to go ahead and keep vocals out for now, but if you listen in the verses, it kind of, here, let's just go ahead and play through it right here. And listen to specifically the acoustic guitar and the keys, the electric guitar. So right here, the electric guitar is carrying a lot of rhythm, and then I notice the synth kind of brings himself in here, and I realized, I might want to highlight that. So I'm going to kind of, in the verses, the guitar kind of drops out. So for something like this, if I keep the dynamic, if I keep synth going, there's not a lot of change between, so I might be listening to that, and he's playing his part, but I might listen, let me back up again, okay? And let's hear the difference of if I drive it with electric guitar as opposed to that. Okay, especially in the verse. Then if I kind of pull that down, see it has a totally different vibe to the verse now. Toms in there. So and then as it kind of starts to pick up some energy here, I might be, let's shift over to the synth a little bit, I think there might be some track hits in this song. Let's see. And I'm like, ooh, that opens, cool, that part. So I listen to this kind of thing to rehearsal. And I'm like, ooh, that part, I really want to highlight this. So I'm like, here, now the guitar's just driving. And if I do bring the vocal in for a second, I notice the synth kind of fight a bit, so I might specifically highlight the synth when the vocals drop out. So I might stick the vocals on top. And now here's the perfect time to bring the synth out,
Somebody scream!
And then back to the guitar. And that's all kind of slight dynamic changes I'm making back here. So it's not necessarily changing what they're doing as opposed to highlighting the different elements to kind of make the whole mix kind of move. And it's not like, you're off for this part and you're on. And does that make sense? Cool. Let's real quick, just to kind of hear the difference. I know we got to get going and wrap up. But let's go ahead and do this right here. And slow songs are usually where you can really, granted right now I have absolutely no effects in this mix. And in faster songs, I stay away from delays just because they just muddy things up because of the short amount of time. Usually the only thing I'll really do is, the only time I'd use a delay is, again, in a fast song, is if it's for an effect like that where I'm like, no, I want this line like repeated, obviously. And it's like, whoa, hey, that was cool. It's cheesy, but it was cool. Or just, usually like some type of a small room reverb on the snare, on the drums and stuff to kind of give them a context so they're not just dry. which in fact, let me jump back to that real quick and actually show what I'm talking about on just the drums. Oops, wrong song. Yeah, let's do it just right here.
In the darkness.
Okay, I'm gonna get rid of everything and just kind of show what I would use. So I think I have set up on here kind of a hall reverb. So this is a pretty long reverb, which if you look, let me see if I can get this up on here. I believe I can. Got this verb right here. All right, cool. So if I play with just, let's see, let me go ahead and, so here, even just with that long verb, how much kind of character and life it brings to it. Now that's, if you look, that's a 3-second decay, so that's a pretty long. So I might come in here, bring my decay down a little bit, so it's a bit shorter. Let's hear it once you get to the snare. So here really quick, let's get a real obvious difference between. So that kind of goes on forever, as opposed to a really short. Does that make sense? So let me go on, yeah. So that kind of just gives a little slight room to it. That's good. So now, I bring that in the whole mix, and again, you know, with effects, cover up the zits without looking like a clown. So it's like, in the entire mix, so there, you know, you're not necessarily hearing reverb, but if you listen to the drums and I take it out, in just a second. So I'm gonna go ahead and just mute the effects right here. Listen to the snare specifically. JK. Okay. Snare, now I'm gonna turn it back on. Really subtle, but it just kind of gives them a context, you know? Same thing with the vocal. Like if I mute, let me go ahead and mute all this real quick. Like that's kind of big.
Everybody
Kind of a big reverb. So I might shorten it up.
Shines in our souls.
Bring that decay down a little bit.
Never letting go.
But that as opposed to,
Never letting go.
but again, you can see how it naturally sets it farther back in the mix. So it could be hard in a fast song to make it pop. So if I bring everything else back in, and I crank a reverb, again, you can kind of hear it. Start back. But it's kind of, it's not, you know, it's taking off. Now the vocal's in my face, you know? One of the things I might do is crank this pre-delay on here. So that'll kind of help separate it from the reverb. Okay, there's, so now I'm hearing the distinct vocal and the reverb. But if I take this pre-delay off, now they kind of blend together. I'm not really bring this back up. Again, very subtle, but so if that makes sense. That's kind of how you kind of subtly use reverbs. And then again, hop into a slower song, you can get away with more, you know, longer reverbs and delays and that kind of thing when you're dealing with a slower song. So let's take this and let's see. Cool. So let's go ahead and so you can kind of hear, and this actually has some piano in it too, so we can talk through that for a second. So and this one has a track that's just this loop, kind of looping. So if I pull everything out real quick. So this is, you can listen, this is what the track is doing. It's kind of a reverberated piano part, that just loops through the whole song. Okay, and then I've got this lead piano line. Let me pull the track out. So this is a pretty good piano sound to start with. He's got a little bit of his own reverb on there. So I don't really want to mess too much with that. But I also want it to cut. I noticed there's not a lot of cut to it. It's kind of darker. It's kind of, so later I realized, okay, in the mix it might get buried kind of easily, you know? So let me hop back up to EQ real quick. On the Nord. You know what they say, where the Nord is, the Lord is. Just saying. No, all right. So I might, scoop out just a little bit of this low end. This 200 hertz is usually where it gets pretty muddy. And then, yeah, he drops out here. The track takes over. And again, it really is helpful as a sound guy to know the songs. We'll say as much as, just like a musician wouldn't come in blind on the song for the first time. He knows the arrangement of the song. It's super helpful as a sound guy as well. And let's go ahead and do this female vocal real quick before we get any farther. So I'm gonna do this, and again, it sounds pretty, let me hop over to it.
So pull me a little closer.
So I'm gonna put my high pass filter up at 100 like normal.
I wanna
And I know she's got a little bit of that proximity effect too. Which is, the cool thing is, it's always at 200 hertz. So if you
Your
listen
love is so much
right there,
sweeter
so just
than anything I've tasted.
clean all that right
I
up.
wanna know your heart.
And then maybe
I wanna know your
there's something in the mid-range that's a little, let's wait till she comes back around. And then maybe just give her a little bit of high. So I'm gonna pull actually everything out for a minute except for a vocal.
just to know your love.
So I'm gonna take the same reverb we had earlier on the male vocal, and I'm just gonna lengthen it up. So I'm gonna take this decay time, and I'm
We'll
gonna
sing it out
move
tonight. Say
it
your love has ravished my heart.
pretty long like that.
Your love has ravished my heart.
The other thing I noticed is the reverb itself is a little
me
mid-rangey, so I'm
over.
actually gonna come, let me see if this
Me
will,
over,
if I
say,
hop
'cause
on
all I
here.
want, 'cause
my effects
all
return, which is where my
I
effect is
want
coming
is
back
to
to where I'm actually hearing it.
be
And I'm gonna come and I'm
with
actually
you
gonna EQ the return a little bit
forever,
and just
with you
scoop out.
forever. Say, pull me a little
Oh
closer.
yeah, right about there. Because if I listen on the
Pull
reverb
me a
itself,
little
get this back
closer.
that right
Take
there
me a little
is what I'm hearing, I
deeper.
think.
I
So I'm
wanna
gonna scoop that
know
out.
your heart.
now listen to how much
I
cleaner the
wanna
reverb
know your heart, 'cause your love is so much sweeter.
Okay, and I could probably even get away with
than
leaving,
anything
probably don't
I've
even need to take that much.
tasted. I wanna know your heart.
and then here's bring a
I
delay in.
wanna know your heart.
And I've got a tap tempo here, so I'll actually tap it in, probably quarter notes with the
I
song.
wanna know your heart.
So, and that's kind of that's what you get from a quarter note delay. If you're tapping halftime, it'll actually usually kind of repeat the phrases. So it depends on what you're going for, but this is a good example.
So pull me a little closer to you.
And I think I've got that darkened up. So it's actually, it's halftime, so it's actually repeating it as opposed to 1, 2, 3, 4. So then you're kind of just catching the end of the phrase.
How great your love
And I'm actually kind of hearing the same thing in this delay.
How great is.
So
Come
now
on,
I'll start
sing it out
bringing-
tonight, say. How great your love is for me.
Gonna start bringing stuff back in.
Is your love.
And a slower song like this too is also a good time for some big like fat tom reverb. Usually if there's toms in a slow song like this, you can crank the delay time on a verb like that. So let's jump back to the beginning and you can hear exactly what I'm talking about. So let's hit this and we'll call it good. So we've got our track, our pad. So the piano's kind of cutting now. Then we'll come on her voice too and do our, again, I'm gonna do my vocal compression, 2.5 ratio, and I'm gonna lower my threshold until she's, about 6 to 8 dB gain reduction. Put it back on the end, and I usually start from there and then I listen. So I listen to these toms. So it kind of gets them a nice. I'm gonna go overboard with it here for a second, so you can kind of hear it. That might be a bit much. Something like that, and then that rim's sounding a little boxy, so I might come do the same thing, scoop out some of that 400 to 500 hertz, clean up the reverb a little bit. Definitely allowed to EQ reverb. That's a good thing. See, it's standing out a little bit too much. It's a little too bright for my taste, like it's too obvious, you know? So that's a little better, that 3K. Let me jump over, you can see. There you go. This right here was standing out. Get that, and it kind of mellows it out a little bit. And then I bring it down, fit it back into the mix. Her vocal. Is that piano? There we go. So those toms are kind of. See, an ambient vocal stuff like that is really where it's cool to kind of push the. Let me hit that section again real quick. It's really cool to push delays and that kind of thing in spots like that. If you listen to her vocal. Kind of trail off like that. But you notice, you can see how the vocal can get lost really quick. So again, you want to kind of try to keep it.
Come on, sing it out tonight. Say your love has ravished my heart.
Get rid of some more of this low end on her voice.
Your love has ravished my heart and taken me over.
So this is, I'm going to skip forward just for a minute and we get to where they build. But here again, listening for kind of.
Come on, sing it out tonight. Say,
So this is where I might want to start backing off the reverbs a little bit because it's naturally going to bring everything forward. So as they build, it kind of brings it in. So if I kind of back off the drum reverb. And I might leave some on the vocal so it kind of keeps that effect. But I might pull off the reverbs a bit. And the electric guitar is your friend in dynamics. So I might pull the piano back and push the guitar a little bit, and add some tension and some. So now you've got all this mid-range. I mean, cymbals are pretty loud. Kind of different, they carry different energies. So if I push it, piano versus electric guitar, and effects versus no effects, those are all kind of different ways you can, again, from the console, kind of control the environment, if that makes sense. But sweet. Well, I think we're about out of time, so hopefully that was. I think we're way over time, but hey.